Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm going to try and talk to you about some of the research that I've done in collaboration with a lot of other people, and try and show you some of the areas that I'm interested in. And it's quite similar to the last talk. I'm very interested in games, mobile devices, and the combination of those two. So, without further ado, I just thought I'd put up a picture of the computer that I first used, a Mac Plus, and how amazing I thought this machine was, it effectively changed my life, but also to remind everybody how underpowered this machine was. It only had half a megabyte of RAM. It didn't have any internal hard disk. You used to store things on a quaint thing called a floppy disk. And then just to show you what we have now, and which everyone nicely, kindly put up, here's my version. And here is my iPhone. Now to compare, this has 2 gigabytes of RAM and 32 gigabytes of memory. Okay. Now, what's quite interesting is currently in the UK, the government is considering banning these things from classrooms. Okay. Now, when in the 25 years ago, they were trying to put these things into classrooms. Now they're trying to take a much more powerful device out of classrooms. I think this just shows you something about the government that currently is in power in the UK. But I do think that these devices are a powerful tool for learning and should not be banned, but should be used creatively and imaginatively to engage the young people of today, because they are using them all the time. Because a recent study from the Pew Internet Research showed that 73% of children teenagers in the US had one of these. Okay? So it soon will be that most, or if not all of the students will have a tool such as this. So if we can use these in powerful ways, I'm sure we can make learning more engaging and more effective. So let me just explain where my research came from. It came really from work conducted by Vanessa Colella in the US way back in the turn of the millennium in the MIT Media Lab, when she was looking at a type of technology called a thinking tag. Okay? And what she did was she used this technology, thinking tag, to create what was known as a participatory simulation, where instead of looking at a simulation on a computer screen, people would actually be the simulation, would actually participate in the simulation. And she created a simulation called the disease simulation game. Okay? Now, these games have actually been used before computers, but she sort of developed it and used a type of technology, as I said, called thinking tag. Now, the basis, the theoretical basis of this research, and a lot of my research, really goes back all the way to Dewey and to experiential learning, and about engaging the children, engaging the students in activities which will build their understandings. Okay? So this is a sort of underlying principle behind a lot of my research and Vanessa Collella's work. And just to give you an idea of what this technology was and just how old it was, really, here's a couple of pictures. These are the thinking tags. They're made out of Lego using technology. You used to hang them around your neck, and they communicate with each other. Okay? And they communicate in a very simple way using infrared communication. And what Vanessa Colella did was she created this disease simulation game where children or students, and these were quite old students, they were 15, 16-year-old students, and there's no reason you couldn't use this sort of simulation game with much older students, such as higher education students, further education students. The principles are the same. And what happened was, one of the students was infected with the disease. They were told to try and communicate with as many of the other students as possible without getting infected. Okay? They weren't told anything about how the disease spread, any of the sort of specifications of the disease, about some people were immune, and there was this latency period. They were told none of that, and what they had to do was explore how the disease spread and who was the person who initially had the disease, i.e. patient 0. And they had a number of sessions. They had spread over 5 days, and in these sessions children began to learn the basic principles of sort of science inquiry and science understanding. And this is what Vanessa Colella was trying to do. She was trying to get the students to engage in scientific understanding in ways which they can't really do by reading books or in a class. So it was a way of getting the children to engage in some sort of scientific practice. And as I said, this is a sort of, these principles can be used in higher education and further education as well. And she came up with some findings which showed the potential of this technology. All right, so from that, I was involved in 2 projects which investigate the use of mobile technologies to support learning, where we tried to use these principles of engagement, try to get children through their own motivation to try and solve problems which would develop their understanding. And in doing this, to create powerful and engaging learning environments or experiences. Right, now the first one, which was a very simple one, was conducted in a Roman villa. Okay, now some of you might not know, I come from Bath. Bath was actually a Roman city. We have a Roman bath in Bath. And there's quite a lot of Roman material scattered throughout the area. And what I find quite interesting is how close it is to the surface, and also how we're even today stumbling across examples. For example, this one, the King's Western Roman Villa, literally was under the ground about this far. Okay, it was found in 1950s by accident because they were putting a road across it, and as they were building the road, they stumbled on this amazing Roman villa. It's right in the middle of a housing estate in a part of Bristol which is not the best part of Bristol. It's, as you will see, it's surrounded by barbed wire, but we were very lucky. We were able to use this as the context for children to learn about the Roman villa. It also has a very gory part as well. When they were excavating this Roman villa, they came across a body, and a body who had been murdered. And at first this caused lots of problems because obviously you've got to get coroners involved, until they realised this was actually about over 1,000 years old, this body, and was a Saxon who had been murdered. And what they used to do in those days was dump executed Saxons in Roman villas because they thought they were scary, because they'd lost the ability to create these great buildings. Anyway, that's a distraction. I should get on. Anyways, just to give you an idea, here is a picture of the villa, and you can see there's a shed. Okay. Now, the reason why there's a shed is because under the shed, or in the shed, we have this amazing mosaics, and we have a hypocaust. And as I said, this was literally that far in the ground. Here is the mosaic that they found. And what we did was we used context-sensitive software to develop a learning experience for the children so they could learn something about this Roman villa. Okay, and we had a group of 10 and 11-year-old children. They went to the Roman villa with the researcher, the teacher, and a parent helper. And they used this context-sensitive aware program using mobile devices to try and learn something about the Roman villa, about hypocausts, about the central heating used in these Roman villas. And what we found was that the children, there was evidence that they learnt. They also seemed to be highly engaged with it. And they used it in a way which didn't distract them from the actual physical environment, because often when you use mobile phones, the children will be looking at their mobile phones rather than looking at the environment, which is what we wanted them to do. So this was like an indication that we could use this technology, we could use it outside, it was robust, it could work, it engaged the children. So we decided to move on to a much more ambitious project, which was called Savannah. Now, Savannah is a mobile game where we combine the features of mobile technologies and games technologies to try and develop an environment to support learning. And the idea here is to get the children to learn something about what it is to be a lion, and a lion in a pride. Okay? And they played in a field, literally a football field, all right, which was part of their school grounds. So they were being a pride of lions in a playing field at school. And they interacted with this virtual savannah using mobile devices to explore the space. And the idea was that we hoped that the children would learn about the sort of rules that we think lions have to sort of use in their sort of animal behavior in the savannah. They were given a mobile device, and this had a GPS system, and this device enabled them to interact with the savannah, so they could see things with it, they could hear things with it, they could smell things with it. And they used this mobile device to navigate the playing field. All right. Now, there were quite small numbers, because really this was, at the time, a really cutting-edge project. And so there was an awful lot of technology involved, an awful lot of support, just to get the thing to work in a robust way. So we had 11 children. They were 12 to 13, so they were in a secondary school, and they were split into two groups, one group of females and one group of males. And I think I have a video. Hope so.
Project.
Could we have some sound?
The Virtual Savannah is a groundbreaking project involving Nesta Future Lab, the BBC Natural History Unit, Hewlett-Packard and the University of Bristol, and the MRL, University of Nottingham. It uses the very latest advances in mobile phone technology to help children learn about the natural world in a new and exciting interactive way. Computers in the classroom overlay an imaginary African savannah upon the school playing field. The location of each player is monitored by global positioning, and text, sounds and images are picked up by the children.
You're going to be a pride of lions, but I want you to forget about all the Disney films that you've seen. Forget your names, forget Simba, okay? The savannah is a dangerous place. The main challenge is that you're going to spend a year on the savannah as a pride of lions. Okay, what we're going to do in just a moment is we're going to watch a piece of video. This is going to show you what life is like on the savannah. But do take note, because some of the things you're going to see you'll need to remember when you go outside.
When it comes to catching food, it's the females in the pride that do all the work. They hunt together, helping each other to ambush and chase the prey.
What we were able to bring to Savannah was our experience as programme makers to help create a game using content from the BBC archive. And that enabled us to get an understanding not only of how teachers and students might use our footage in the future, but also what kind of material, what kind of content might be appropriate for use in this new medium.
Videos, books and the internet are all available for the children to find out about how lions live, but it's up to them to decide which resources they use.
So, level 1, this is where you first get to go out onto the savannah. It's the wet season. It might look sunny out here now, but actually the savannah's really, really wet. So it's a clean savannah. What you need to do now is go out there and make sure that that savannah belongs to you. So you can do that by spraying all over the place, okay? Luckily you do it with a button. The reason you have to make your territory belong to you is so that when you go out hunting later on, your cubs can be put somewhere safe. On your PDA, you'll find different pictures and different sounds will tell you that you're in different parts of the savannah. What you need to do is mark them, okay? But you only have 4 sprays each.
Okay, so try and cover as much land as we can and spray as much as you can. Like this bit. I got 2. Did you spray Gone in?
Back in the classroom, the technical experts can see the players' movements and the decisions they're making. These are displayed on a smart board, and when a player decides to spray a habitat, that area pops up on the board.
Don't be shy. Spray, spray, spray. I've only got 1 spray left.
What we're trying to do is to create a game that's sufficiently compelling so that the first time they go out, they have a go, they're excited, they're interested in doing that, and they fail horribly. So it's in their interest to come back in, to do the research, to find things out so that the next time they can go out and play a lot better.
One of the most interesting things about Savannah is the way that you do go out into the field and experience something, and then you come back and use a completely different interface to kind of reflect on what you did. And that feels to me like probably quite a fundamental idea to the way that kind of location-based experiences could work.
That's the tree.
That's the tree.
What's that?
So you can't see the ones that you've not centred. Virtual Savannah is different from learning in a conventional classroom in that it offers children, firstly, the opportunity to take control of their own learning. Secondly, it offers them the opportunity to learn while they're outside, while they're moving around. And a lot of children don't learn best when they're sitting at a computer screen in a stationary position.
The next stage of the game is level 2, where players become lionesses and have to go out onto the virtual savannah to hunt.
I got like 1, 2, 3, attack. Come on, come on, come on, lion, come on. Ah! Attack failed. Just run away from it.
Each player's energy level is shown on a meter with thirst and hunger indicators. These turn from green to red as energy levels fall, telling the players they must eat and drink to stay alive.
Elephant. Elephant, bye. Elephant! Give me! Elephant down there! You two! Come down here. We all need to attack it together. Oh, you are dangerously hungry. 3, 2, 1, attack. Oh, your attack failed.
Ooh, what were you attacking up there?
That's an elephant right at the top there.
Oh, you're not
But that never died. There was nothing else.
Now, what's that?
Oh.
Yeah, look where you didn't go.
We've learnt a lot from the Savannah project. We've learnt about the nature of an educational experience. For example, we've discovered how important it is to challenge the children and not just to give them nice pictures to look at and nice sounds to listen to. We've learnt how important it is to have periods of reflection embedded in the experience so they have a time to consider what's been going on. We've learnt something about how very simple mechanisms like a little bit of audio and still images can transport people to a virtual world even when they're walking around a very familiar football pitch.
The thing I learned was that when you try to explore, you need to go in a pride because you need all the help you can get to do something.
I thought it was pretty cool actually, being a lion, because it was a new experience.
My biggest surprise was when everybody tried attacking the elephant and we still could defeat it.
It was a lot better than reading a book about it because you actually felt that you were actually being a lion.
All right, okay. Well, I hope that gave you a good idea of the sort of experience that the children had, and just to sort of go over the sort of main activities they engaged in and also some of the findings. As you saw, there are actually two areas in this game. There was the den, which was inside the classroom, and the playing field. Now, as it was mentioned on the video, an important aspect of this is that there needs to be these periods of reflection, okay, to enable the students to sort of think about what they have done, to consider how well or how they could improve, and engage in the activity. All right, so that's important. And then there's the playing field where they actually play the game. All right. Now here's the technology, and at the time this technology was sort of very advanced. Obviously now you've got the same sort of technology in mobile phones, and these are the sort of boards that the students had when they went back into the den to enable them to reflect on their performance in the last game. So they've got one there, and they had another one which showed the areas that they had been in. All right? Now, there were two different activities, challenges, or levels, if you like. The first level was when they had to map the territory. So they had to actually go around the field and find out what was in the field. And this was the thing to do with the sprays. The students had to collaborate really because they only had 4 sprays each, and so they needed to use those sprays most effectively to try and cover all the ground. And as you saw at the start, they didn't. They would just use they'd spray the same spot. Each student would spray the same spot, which obviously is not very effective. They didn't distribute the sprays. It also caused them great hilarity, considering what they thought spraying was. All right, so that's the first challenge, or the first level. The second challenge was when they actually behaved as a pride of lions, and they had to survive in the savannah, which meant they had to kill other animals in order to gain energy to be able to survive. And as you saw in the video, sometimes they didn't manage to kill the animals, and then they would run out of energy and die, okay? Obviously, not in real life, but, and with the beauty of a game, you just had to go back and restart, okay? But it did give them a great experience, okay? And it did sort of give them an experience of how to be, what it was like to be a pride of lions. Now, there was a group of boys and a group of girls. The group of boys had 3 games, the group of girls had 4. The games lasted approximately 15 minutes, And as already mentioned, after the game they would come back into the den, and with the help of the teacher they would reflect on their performance and discuss how they could improve it. Okay? Now, what about the findings? Well, these were very interesting. They showed both the potential of this activity, but also they showed some of the limitations as well. One thing, that it did show that they identified with the lions. You heard it in the video. I'm dead. I'm being attacked. Okay? There was a very interesting incident. Because we were using GPS, and because the GPS you would lose GPS, and what would happen if you lost GPS is that the last thing on your screen would remain on your screen. Now, this caused a very hilarious moment, because one of the boys went into the area where the angry lion was, no, the angry elephant was, and then he lost his GPS thing, and then he ran out of the area screaming, "The angry elephant is chasing me," and because it was the last thing on his screen, he ran all the way around the field. "It's still chasing me, it's still chasing me." I think this one, it showed how engaged they were, and two, just sort of one, the weaknesses of the technology, and in this instance it actually sort of helped us, but sometimes it did hinder the experience. For example, sometimes you lost it completely, and then they had to go out of the game and then get restarted, which didn't help. And I do think even today there are problems with GPS, and you can lose GPS. There's also the issue of how sophisticated the GPS is and how fine-grained it is. I think it's still the case that even in the best environments, it can only detect your presence in about up to 5 meters. The other thing was the children expected that the game had more sophistication than it actually did. There was one incident where when they were thirsty and they needed a drink, there was a river, and they thought that in order to drink the water in the river, they had to attack the river. But all they needed to do was stand in the water, and that would cool them down. Okay, so we can see how sometimes the technology was simpler than what the children expected. Now, the other thing was the children did learn the rules of the game, and the rules of the game were hopefully the rules that lions obey when they're out in the savannah. And one of those rules is quantification of risk. Lions basically count how many prey there are and how many lions they have, and whether the number of lions will be enough to kill a particular prey. And the children soon got the hang of this and realized that there were some animals, such as the angry elephant, which it didn't matter how many they had, they couldn't kill. But there were other prey, such as a wildebeest, where if they had all their pride together, then they would be able to kill it. Okay? This also led to the development of group work. Okay? In a very simple form, it has to be said. There was, again, an interesting incident where the technology failed us, and because of this, it sort of showed that group work sometimes was not always beneficial, because what happened was someone would find a wildebeest, and they would be the first one, and because of that, they were like on the edge of the area, and as I said, with GPS, the areas can move, okay? So he was on the edge of it, okay, and sometimes he moved out of it, not because he moved, but because the GPS area moved, but all his friends were right in the middle of it and didn't and didn't move out of it when it moved. And so when they were trying to kill a wildebeest, everyone pressed the attack button, and because at that time he was out of the GPS area, he wasn't involved in the attack and didn't get any of the benefits of a successful attack on a wildebeest. He was very, very angry when that happened and went off and sulked on his own, which I can understand. He did find the wildebeest, but he got none of the benefits of the wildebeest. The other thing was, as I said, they did learn that you needed all the pride to attack some animals, and you only needed some of the pride to attack other animals. Unfortunately, it was a very simple strategies that they learned. Okay, and lions have very sophisticated strategies. And the other sort of missed opportunity with this game was, as you saw, they went back into the den and they had lots of resources about the strategies that lions use. And so they learnt about these different strategies that lions use, but they couldn't employ them in the game because the game didn't allow that degree of sophistication. Just to give you an idea, there's sort of three different types of strategies, which I'll talk in a bit of a minute. So just in discussion, I would like to hopefully show how these sort of technologies can be used creatively and imaginatively to build powerful learning environments, okay? Now, I wouldn't say that Savannah was perfect, okay? We did identify some weaknesses with it. As I said, one of those weaknesses was that the challenges were too simple, okay? It was engaging to a point, but in order for it to have sort of a continuous engagement, we would have needed to have had the challenges to be much more sophisticated than the challenges that we employed. Okay? Because that is what we wanted this game to encourage. We wanted the children to fail, okay, to come back into the den, to read about how lions behave in the real world, and then say, okay, well, we failed last time. What do lions actually do, okay, to hunt prey? Okay, well, let's see if we can use some of those strategies to succeed in the tasks that we failed at in the last game. Because, as I said, lions use a range of sophisticated strategies. They ambush, they blitz, they lay siege, okay? And this all raises lots of interesting questions which hopefully the children would try and engage in. Like, how do lions communicate which strategy to use? When they communicate the strategy, how do the lions know where to go? What part of the strategy they are playing in? Because obviously they can't communicate, and even if they could communicate, you wouldn't want to be making a lot of noise when you're hunting. And so this all raises lots of interesting questions, which the children could have sort of thought about or sort of raised in the game if it had allowed that degree of sophistication. So just to sort of conclude, it is very clear, I think, that mobile games can support learning. We're sort of in the process of learning how. These first two attempts are, are interesting. They raise more questions than answers, but I would like to say that they do show that they do have potential, and that these are sort of examples of how we can use mobile devices in combination with games to engage students at every level. And this is not just young children, sort of adolescents. I think you can use these games in higher education and further education to support a type of learning and a type of learning activity which is difficult to get the students to do in a normal sort of classroom. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard, for this very interesting presentation today. We have quite some time for discussion, so if you have some questions for Richard.
Maybe I didn't pay attention, but which year was it actually that the experiment with the Savannah was conducted?
It was about 2005.
I found it very interesting. Thanks for the presentation. I was just wondering, is there any plan to transfer those games to the newly developed virtual technologies?
Unfortunately, there isn't. I mean, I think, as you say, it would be nice to move those technologies, to support them onto those different technologies. And I do think we could use the more sophisticated technologies to try and develop it further. I do think that some of the principles are the same. I think the principles, and I do think that some of the questions that this software raises haven't yet been answered. And there aren't current examples of games like this. There are other mobile games that are developed at Harvard and developed in MIT, but they're more in the form of sort of quests. They're not so much in the form of these sort of participatory simulations. We actually take part in the simulations. So I think it would be very interesting to try.
Yeah. I have a question with reference to this future lab, because we have in management such kind of games which are in the form of future labs where you can, where students participate in groups, for example, establish a company, and there are also online games which you follow. For example, there's this online future lab which has been established by an intercultural forum where where students establish a company in virtual teams, and then they run this company. There are also challenges which they have to face. One of the critics that has come in the last few years based on the experience was that it is, on one side it's very good because it's experiential. On the other side, sometimes the students have get a wrong feedback, which when they try to test it in reality, in a real company, it's a totally different result. How would you respond to this?
Well, I think I do like those type of games. I think they're very useful. I've been involved in a project which developed one for social workers. I think it sounds to me, I mean, it sounds like the underlying model behind the game, if it provides false feedback, needs to be improved to be more match the actual reality. But I do think those sort of games are really useful. Like there was one developed for lawyers because what happens is that it was shown that solicitors coming out of law schools in the UK had a good understanding of law, but they didn't know how to run a law firm. And law schools were not providing them with that experience. And these sort of games can provide that sort of experience by giving them some sort of experience of how to run a law firm, or in your case, companies. And I do think they're very good. It's just a shame that if the underlying model doesn't reflect the actual operating, I think the model needs to be improved to make sure the feedback corresponds to the sort of feedback they get in the real world.
Did none of the parents complain that their children were involved in such a violent sort of game?
We got no complaints. I do agree at one level Savannah seems to be teaching children how to attack animals. It was it was a chance for these children to engage with technology which they didn't have experience of. It was a chance to engage in an activity which did have relevance to their curriculum. So we didn't get any complaints. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned in your presentation that there is a need of a period of reflection.
Yeah.
Please, can you give some details about this period?
Well, I think this is something which I think is quite interesting in game-based learning. A lot of people talk about how the actual activity of playing a game is the most important thing. However, sometimes when you're in a game, you don't have this opportunity to reflect on your performance to be able to improve it. So I do think there needs to be a period afterwards where you can reflect on that performance. I can't, beyond sort of suggesting that there were natural periods where this reflective period could be implemented. I don't have any more details about that.
Thank you for the talk. I've had some experience with these kinds of games, and always what comes up is that there's some certain perspective, some certain aspects which can be learned in such kind of games. However, these are kind of limited. So the question is, would you suggest that these kind of games are complementary to the learning experience of a student? For example, a student learns this and then goes back to a classroom, only a classroom, and learns about the theories and the facts which he would do in a normal classroom setting.
Oh, I think that's a very good question. I think there are certain types of experiences and activities which these type of games can only provide. And I think in those situations it's not just about being complementary to classroom-based activities. And I think, especially now when people talk a lot about 21st century skills and about how these are to do with creativity, to do with problem solving, to do with group work, these are types of skills which are very hard to learn without actually taking part in them. And I think these are the sort of skills that these games could provide the environments to learn. I mean, at another level, you can see how obviously these games could be complementary to classroom-based learning. They can help to provide experiences to the students which would bring alive some of the sort of lessons they're taught in classrooms. So at one level they are complementary, but at another level I think it's very much about what we want our children to learn and how they're going to learn it. And sometimes I'm not sure classrooms are the best places for children and students to learn certain types of skills and sort of lessons.
I have a question as well. Thank you very much, Richard, for this very interesting presentation. Why it makes me a little bit skeptic, there are three criteria. It's, I think, very often the case that the kids, they have very sophisticated devices, better than the teachers have. The equipment of schools are always behind. And the third criteria is teachers are not on this trained level like the kids are. So do you see a problem in this area?
I think, so let me just repeat just for my own benefit. So there are three sort of concerns. One is the technology. Children have better technology than schools. The teachers are not geared up to do this sort of activity. And what was the third again? The equipment. Okay. Well, I think in terms of the equipment, I think in the future, I think we should use the students' equipment. Therefore, if they're bringing in more powerful equipment, then we should use it. And there are ways of doing that. I take the point about teachers may not having the skills to be able to support this. And I think this is where we need robust learning environments, which are just really plug and play for the teachers. Because obviously Savannah had lots of support, which in a everyday classroom would just not be possible. So I do think there needs to be a way to provide a sort of plug and play activity which the teachers can use in their classrooms and has resources for the teachers and for the students. For instance, Savannah, all it needed was a playing field. All schools have playing fields. It could have been very easily portable. And you know, in a robust form, it could be a useful way to provide these sort of experiences.
Thank you for your contribution. It's somehow connected to the previous question. I'm wondering if you think about the new generation of smart mobile devices which you wear on your wrist, for example the iWatch or also other technologies such as the iBeacon. They feature a lot of new technical features, for example pulse rate measurement or other things. Are there any follow-up projects planned to investigate how these additional features can support additional learning ways how to learn?
Unfortunately, I'm not involved in any additional projects, but there certainly are projects involved to do with health-based activities using those sort of body monitoring devices, and I think again it could be a useful tool, a useful function which you could adapt into some sort of game or some sort of activity which could provide the students with useful information. I mean, there's been recent research on using scientific probes, which is not exactly what you're asking, but you can see how you could use sort of body monitoring devices to do sort of similar sort of activities about how does your heart rate, what happens to your heart rate when you run 100 meters as fast as you can, you know, during the race, after the race, how does that differ depending on the individuals. So I think, again, it could be a very powerful tool to sort of illustrate some important lessons for students.
Please, could you tell us more about how you set up or designed the Savannah simulation? And you said some of the levels of sophistication were not enough for the children involved. What lessons did you learn about setting up or designing such a scenario or such a game?
In terms of design, it was a participatory design. They got the children involved. As you saw, it involved the main developers were Nottingham in the mixed reality lab. They had a lot of experience of developing games on mobile devices. Hewlett-Packard at the time had a constant context-aware system. So basically what they did was they combined the context-aware system with the games technology that Nottingham had developed. The actual design of the game, they did a lot of discussions with teachers, a lot of discussions with students, with other children to develop the game to try and make it as engaging as possible. So that was the basic process that could be used. I think in terms of developing it further, to develop those strategies further, I do think it would be possible, especially with the technology today, to allow the students to use more sophisticated strategies such as ambushing, such as sieging, and I think you could quite easily implement those sort of strategies now.
I have a question, Richard.
All right.
I found it very interesting how to use mobile games as a catalyst for learning. Like the children were very interested in finding more about the lions and learning more about them because they had a personal experience of being a lion. Is there any evidence supporting this thesis? That
there's some evidence. We did measure their understanding of lions' behaviour before the task, and we did measure it after the task, and they did learn. Unfortunately, we didn't have a control group. There's clearly evidence in the videos of the children actually engaging in that sort of self-motivated exploration of how they could solve the problems they were facing in the savannah. So there's lots of evidence of children looking at the videos, looking through the books to try and find out how to use the sort of strategies that lions use to survive out in the savannah.
Thank you very much for your attention and enjoy the rest of the conference.